This week's parsha is Parshas Vayishlach, and there's so much to discuss. But I wanted to discuss a little bit about the circumstances of Rachel's death, which are in this week's parsha, and also the birth of Binyamin, which happened, of course, at the same time. As Rachel is dying, Binyamin is born. She probably had some huge hemorrhage when she was in the middle of childbirth. It was not uncommon for women to die nebuch in childbirth in the ancient world. And this is unfortunately what happens to Rachel. The Torah says that they left Beit El, and they were in Kivras Haaretz. Now the word Kivras Haaretz is a very difficult word to translate. There are a number of different interpretations. If you take a look at source number 5 in the Medrash Rabbah, the Chachamim give an opinion that says that is Kvar Habar Matsui Va'onas HaGeshamim Avra Va'adayin Hashrav Lo Ba. It was already after the primary rain had fallen. The soil was firm but not muddy. Now, what is the point of the Midrash? That's what the words Kivras Haaretz mean. It was a time when the earth was firm. It was traversable. And what the Torah is therefore trying to convey to us is that the reason why Yaakov did not transport Rachel after her death to Ephrat and Beit Lechem, which were the cities that were nearby, is not because he couldn't get her there. He was able to transport her body and give her a decent burial. But it was by divine decree, because he knew the future. He knew the future of what would happen, that Rachel mevaka al baneha, that Rachel was going to need to arise from her grave as the Jews were being led out at that very spot by Nebuchadnezzar into the exile. And Hashem wanted Rachel to bear witness and to cry for her children. And so that's why, even though it was possible for Yaakov to bury her, because it was Kivras Haaretz, nevertheless, he buried her on that spot. And it was on the way to Ephrat, but not to Ephrat. She was having difficulty giving birth. The midwife tells her, don't fear, this is also a son. As her soul was leaving and she was dying, she calls his name Ben Oni. Now, what does the word Ben Oni mean? You have a number of different explanations as what Ben Oni means, but it certainly all implies that it's the son of my travail. And his father calls him Binyamin, the son of my right side, is the way Rashi understands it. So some understand the word right side is meaning that it's the son of the northerner, because Yaakov Avinu had traveled from the north to come to this part of Judea, and so you want to identify the child as, this is the son of the man who comes from the north. So Binyamin, because Yamin implies the north. The Rashbam has an interesting explanation. He says Binyamin means like Ben Yamim. He's my son of old age, because I'm an older man now, Yaakov Avinu says. But also the word Yamin, as like the Ramban says, implies great strength. So whereas Rachel sees travail, sees her son as a sign of death, because she's dying, his father, on the other hand, sees great strength in Binyamin and sees great reason for optimism for the future. And so the Torah tells us, "Vatomas Rachel vatikaver b'derech Efrasa hi beis lachem." Rachel dies and she is buried on the pathway to Ephrat, which is Beit Lechem. And Yaakov places a matzeva, and that's Kever Rachel to this very day. Just wanted to share with you a commentary of the Alshich, and we just want to pull a few ideas from the Alshich. Let's just jump straight away to source number 8 because we're running short on time. As her soul was departing, Batikra nafsha haniskar shemo ben oni sheyatza nafsho omeres ben oni. That it's not that she called her son Ben-Oni, she calls her soul that is departing from her Ben-Oni. Meaning what? Lamar she'al aninus she'asida lihisonein al Yisrael mevakal baneh. What was her sadness about? Her sadness was not about her own personal death. That Rachel was able to accept. Her sadness is that I know that I need to be buried here. I know that I need to die here and be buried here, because there will come a time when I will need to arise from my grave and cry for my children on this very spot. That's the Ben-Oni that Rachel is calling out. So you see that for the Alshich, it's not that Rachel is personally aggrieved because of her own suffering in life. She has this great scope of vision to be able to see the future, and realizes that her tears are going to continue for hundreds and hundreds of years. But at the same time, she merits a child, and through this experience of giving birth, and through Rachel's tears, the Jewish people will come back from their captivity. Because of Rachel's tears, the Jews will come back. And of course, he's making reference to the prophet Yirmiyah, who says, Ki yesh sachar lefu'ulatech v'shavu me'eretz oyev. There is a reward for your hard work, Rachel, for all of your tears and all of your crying, because as a result of all of your tears and all your crying, they will return back from captivity. Ach aviv karlo binyamin. But so that's why Rachel calls him Ben-Oni. She sees that there is going to come through a product of all of my travail, there will be a final coming back of the captives. Ach aviv karlo binyamin, shehu al zuchus beis hamikdash sheni ushlishi shenivnim al yada al shebachs al churban risha. But Yaakov has a different perspective, and he calls him Binyamin, which the word itself is an allusion to the second and third temples. That because of Rachel's crying over the captivity, and we will have the first temple destroyed at the time of the destruction of the first temple, the second temple and even the third temple shall be rebuilt because of that crying. Al kain karalo binyamin shebeteva zu ba'asios binyan otvos yud mem. He says, because what is the word binyamin? If you take out the yud and mem from the word binyamin, you get the word binyan, which is the building. And yud mem shehi chamishim. Using gematria, the second and third temple come out to the number 50. We won't go through the numbers, the numerology now, but he also says that the letter nun, which is yud and mem, which adds up to letter 50, also is an allusion to that ultimate goal of 50, like the Jubilee year, when everything returns back and the temple is rebuilt. Okay, but what I wanted to bring out from this Alshich is that you really need to have two completely different perspectives of the future in order to be able to bring the Geula. You need the perspective of Rachel, and you need the perspective of Yaakov. And I think that it's no coincidence that Yaakov represents a vision of optimism, of a vision of a future building of the temple, whereas Rachel's vision is limited to her crying of Ben-Oni. But there's a need for that. There's a need for that crying that does not go beyond that point of crying to the time of consolation and great joy. Because if a person has perfect vision of great joy, of the ultimate redemption, then they can't really shed bitter tears, can they? In other words, if you clearly understand the unfolding of all of Jewish history until the coming of Mashiach, and you see it so clearly, so then there's no reason to cry.
Like Rabbi Akiva.
Like Rabbi Akiva. So there needs to be a Rachel, because, by the way, and you know that Rachel and Leah are represented in the Kabbalistic literature as Rachel represents the physical world, Leah represents the metaphysical world. Rachel represents survival in the Olam HaGashmi, in the physical world. Rachel is deliberately limited in her vision, and that's why only a Rachel is mevaka al baneha. Only a Rachel can cry for her children, because she allows her vision to be limited to only what's going on in this world. Without that crying, without those bitter tears of me'ana lihinachem al baneha, that she refuses to be consoled for her children, nothing can comfort me. If you don't have that crying, you cannot have redemption. It is only through the bitter tears of a Rachel that Hashem says you are deserving of redemption. And so you need to sometimes limit your view to the view of a Rachel in order to be able to spur and bring upon ourselves the redemption. That's the koach of a Rachel Imenu. And that's why I believe that she could not be buried in Efrat. Because Efrat and Beit Lechem represent a place of great consolation and blessing. You take a look at the book of Ruth, and the discussion of Beit Lechem and Efrat are replete throughout the book of Ruth. Because all it talks about is that there was a man from Beit Lechem Yehuda, from Beit Lechem, and his name was Elimelech, and he leaves, he goes to the plains of Moab, and then they come back and they come to see Boaz, who there is in Efrat in Beit Lechem Yehuda. And eventually Ruth marries Boaz, and it says in source number 6, Vayomru kol ha'am asher bishar ve'azekenim edim. They said, we are your witnesses. Yitein Hashem et ha'isha ha'ba'al beitecha ki Rachel u'chaleya. They say, may this woman, Ruth, who is coming into your home, may she be like Rachel and Leah. Asher banu shtehem et Beit Yisrael. That the two of them collectively are necessary to build the house of Israel. You need the Rachel of Olam Hazeh, of this world, with the limited vision of the suffering of this world, in order to cry the bitter tears. And you need the optimism of Leah in order to be able to see the future. Va'asechayil be'efrata u'krashem be'veit lechem, and therefore be powerful in Efrat. What does the word Efrat come from? First of all, it comes from the word Puri, and it comes from the word Ophir. The Radak says that Ophir is gold. And so it represents the ultimate blessings of the future. And Beit Lechem, of course, is the house of bread. It represents the idea of great bounty. And that is not the view of a Rachel. The view of a Rachel is captivity. The view of a Rachel is the Jews going into Galus. And so therefore they give the bracha to Ruth and to Boaz that you should be able to build a dynasty that comes from Leah, that is able to bring us to the Yemos HaMashiach, to bring us to that period of Efrat and Beit Lechem. But at the same time, there should always be an aspect of Rachel that is associated with your household, so that you have also the ability to cry when there is a Shoah. You have the ability to cry, to be able to see the suffering of today that you can couple with the optimism and the consolation of the future. And therefore we find the same language of Beit Lechem and Efrat when we talk about David himself. In Shmuel Aleph it says, who was David? David ben Ish Efrati, Hazemi Beit Lechem Yehuda. That David himself is identified by this particular identification. He is a man of Efrat. He comes from Beit Lechem Yehuda. All of these ideas connote the idea that he can bring us to the Yemos HaMashiach through that optimism that the Alshich refers to in the name Binyamin. But the irony is that you can't get to that point unless you have a Rachel involved as well, unless you have the vision of a Rachel too, to be able to cry. So I guess what the idea that I'm trying to convey with these sources is that while it's true that every Jew has to be optimistic about the future, and we always end off with Dvar Torah, which we should see the Gula b'mheira b'yameinu amen, but at the same time, we have to know that there's always times for indulgence in the here and now, and there's a time to cry, and there's a time for optimism. And the emotions of every Jew have to be balanced between those two, to be able to indulge in the suffering and the pain of a Shoah, and also to be able to have the optimism for the future. If you have one to the exclusion of the other, then you can never get to the final destination. So let's cry today so that we can see the Gula for tomorrow. Have a great day.